Chinese agents are caught trying to bribe the IRS. China may regret its take on the protests in Venezuela, and a deadly typhoon makes landfall in China. And more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell, and this episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, you should be using a VPN like Surfshark to cover your tracks and protect your identity. I'll tell you more at the end. So let's begin with some light small talk about the weather. Typhoon Gaemi made landfall in China after causing deaths and injuries in Taiwan and the Philippines. It was just the tail end of the storm, but both China and North Korea were badly affected, with over 20 people reported dead in China alone, along with mudslides, flooding, and damaged crop fields left in its wake. It's one of the biggest catastrophes to hit the people of China and North Korea since communism. Some areas received record landfall. State-run Xinhua news agency reported that rains have damaged close to 1,000 homes, prompting the evacuation of 11,000 people and causing over 1,300 road collapses in Zexing. Weather-wise, this has been a terrible year for China, with extreme heat, record flooding, and severe winds badly damaging the country's agricultural sector and infrastructure, as if China's infrastructure needed any help in falling apart. And speaking of things that are inevitable and disastrous, communist pseudo-elections. The CCP has congratulated Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro on his fraudulent so-called victory in the recent elections, which given Xi's election record was a pretty predictable response. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China congratulates Venezuela for smoothly holding its presidential election and congratulates President Maduro on his successful re-election. Yep, smooth as crunchy peanut butter spread over a pile of wood chips. Lin also reiterated that China and Venezuela are good friends and partners, and that the CCP wants to enrich the all-weather strategic partnership it has with Nicolas Maduro. Although the way things are looking right now in Venezuela, that all-weather looks to be mostly twisters, which is fitting because, like this movie, a socialist regime getting toppled is a predictable sequel to something we've already seen. Meanwhile, the U.S. is bolstering its military alliance with the Philippines with $500 million in funding to modernize the Filipino military and progress on a new pact. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin were both in Manila to meet with Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The meeting comes in the shadow of several clashes between the Chinese Communist Party and the Philippines over the Second Thomas Shoal, which have progressively gone from bad to worse. So far, no Filipino citizens have died, but if that happened, Marcos said it would be very close to an act of war. What would constitute an actual act of war, he didn't say. But if that ever happened, it would drag in the Philippines' ally, the United States, hence the meeting. Blinken and Austin assured Marcos that the White House's commitment to Manila's security will remain no matter who wins the upcoming U.S. election. They also hinted there's an option to increase the military aid package in a matter of months should everything go smoothly. Because despite that deal the Philippines and China signed last week to de-escalate tensions in the South China Sea, with the CCP you need to prepare for every eventuality, especially these sharp, pointy ones. Which is why Blinken also met with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, in Laos. I'm sure it was lousy. Blinken and Wang agreed to keep an open line of communication despite increasing tensions between China and the U.S. But Blinken expressed his concern over China's military and surveillance activity in the South China Sea. Also discussed at the meeting was China's support for Russia's defense industrial base, with a warning that the U.S. would take appropriate measures if China doesn't end its support for the Kremlin. Other global and regional issues were also discussed between the two sides, which basically sounds like every other meeting Blinken has had with Chinese officials over the past 2 years. A statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that Wang told Blinken during the meeting that the U.S. holds a wrong perception of China and urged a return to rational and pragmatic China policy. I couldn't agree more. For example, China has turned many American towns and cities into wastelands, stripped of industry, and then pumped them full of Chinese fentanyl, killing tens of thousands. Maybe let's stop giving them money. And after the break, bribery, foreign agents, and the IRS. Welcome back. In the U.S., 2 men have pleaded guilty to acting as agents on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party and bribery. John Chen and Lin Feng, the two men, pled guilty to bribing an IRS agent in connection with a plot to target US-based practitioners of Falun Gong. Whoa, is this going to be a story where the good guys are the IRS? Falun Gong is a spiritual practice from China that is being heavily persecuted in China. According to the indictment documents, from at least January through May 2023, Chen and Feng worked inside the US at the direction of a PRC government official to further the PRC's campaign to repress and harass Falun Gong practitioners. As part of this campaign, the men took part in a scheme to manipulate the IRS's whistleblower program and strip the tax-exempt status of an entity run by the Falun Gong. We don't know for sure what the entity was, but I'd venture a guess it was Shen Yu, the classical Chinese dance and music show that describes itself as China before communism. They paid $5,000 to an IRS agent with the promise of more money to come to push the complaint forward. But oopsie, the agent was actually an undercover officer. During this mission, Chen, on a recorded call, explicitly noted that the purpose of paying these bribes was to carry out the PRC's aim of toppling the Falun Gong, which makes Chen just about the worst spy ever. Of course, the scheme didn't exactly go as planned for the CCP or the two men. More information is likely to come out about the case in the coming weeks. Both men face a possible sentence of a total of 25 years in jail. Maybe they can pay less for their crimes by writing off China as a dependent. And after many months of talks, China and Taiwan have reached a deal over the deaths of two Chinese fishermen following a chase by Taiwan's Coast Guard. The Chinese fishermen were part of a group fishing in Taiwanese waters. Since China's fishing fleet is closely tied to China's military, and China wants to invade Taiwan, the Taiwanese Coast Guard gave chase. But one of the boats capsized and the two men drowned. The Taiwanese Coast Guard declined to reveal details, but the agreement involves compensation to the victims' families and the repatriation of their bodies to China, according to some reports. But that's not easing cross-strait tensions, because lawmakers from 6 countries say the CCP is still pressuring them not to attend a conference in Taiwan. Politicians from Bolivia, Colombia, Slovakia, North Macedonia, Bosnia, and an unnamed country in Asia said they were getting texts, calls, and urgent requests for meetings that would conflict with their plans to travel to Taipei. Makes you wonder if other countries got the same messages but didn't come forward. The conference begins on Monday and is being held by IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. IPAC is made up of a group of hundreds of lawmakers from 35 countries, concerned about how democracies approach Beijing and have long faced pressure from the Chinese Communist Party. Some members have even been sanctioned by China, and the group in 2021 was targeted by Chinese state-sponsored hackers, according to an unsealed US document from earlier this year. But the alliance's director, Luc de Pulford, said this time the pressure from the CCP is unprecedented. That's because in the past, campaigns against IPAC based out of China happened after the conference. Now there's a wholesale attempt to prevent people from attending altogether even before it starts. The campaign isn't all that uniform either. In some cases, lawmakers described receiving vague inquiries about their plans to travel to Taiwan, but in others, the contact was more menacing, with one lawmaker saying Chinese diplomats messaged the head of her political party with a demand to stop her from going. The CCP can threaten Taiwan and its allies all at once, but it just ends up solidifying support for Taipei in the end. China's foreign ministry has declined to comment on the accusations, and it doesn't look like this is deterring any countries from sending representatives to the conference. But the CCP did get something it wanted dearly. Another visit from a European leader. This time, it was from Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Italy and China signed a 3-year action plan to reset relations between their two countries, which is strange because Meloni was the one to pull Italy out of China's Belt and Road Initiative just a few months ago. And China's economy isn't exactly hot right now. But according to Meloni, the agreement is meant to implement past agreements and experiment with new forms of cooperation, which makes sense considering that Stellantis, an automaker that includes Italy's Fiat, announced back in May that it formed a joint venture with China's Leapmotor, an electric car startup. That would enable Leapmotor to sell electric vehicles in Europe, getting around EU tariffs meant to limit that very thing. One of the concerns about Chinese EVs is all the spying they could do. China is trying to collect data from people all around the world, without their consent, of course. And that's why no matter where you live, no matter what you do online, you need to take active steps to protect yourself. You should always be keeping your internet activity private with a VPN like Surfshark, especially when you're doing things like logging into your bank account or credit card online. If you ever use shared Wi-Fi, you're in danger. Hackers can easily steal your password without you even knowing it. And when you travel, especially overseas, you might need a VPN that makes it look like you're in your home country, just to log into your accounts. So it saves a huge potential hassle. And you can install it on as many devices as you want, even on your Amazon Fire TV stick. It's great if you want it to appear like you're logged in from a different country, so you can get access to all the good Netflix shows that are geo-blocked. So seriously, check out Surfshark. Go to surfshark.com/uncensored and you'll get 4 extra months when you sign up. That's surfshark.com/uncensored, or use the code uncensored at checkout. The link is in the description below. Now, YouTube, whose parent company Google has all kinds of interests in China, might not like me talking about why we need to defend Taiwan. So on my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming, in a totally unrelated video, I talk about the new Final Fantasy game, where you need to go defend an island nation from a sinister evil. Totally unrelated. Check it out. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.